Hello, everybody, and welcome to Virtual TrekCon 5 with Sirach Lofton.
Hello, hello.
And Mr. Matt Boardman, of course.
Hey, hey.
Yeah.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we have a very, very special guest. We've got a concept illustrator and designer. It's Mr. John EAVES. What's up, John?
Hey, thanks for having me on today.
We're so freaking thrilled. He's worked on so many projects. It's insane. We're not going to be able to cover all of them, but we're going to try. For all the Star Trek fans' purposes, just to name a few, we've got Deep Space Nine, Enterprise, Discovery, Picard, and like 8 movies. So the most impressive thing, just right off the bat, if we can just jump into this, John, for me, the most impressive thing is usually you have people that worked on old Star Trek. And then you also have people that worked on newer Star Trek. Or you have some people that worked on old Star Trek and new Star Trek. But I've never seen anybody that's worked on the older stuff, you know, Deep Space Nine, Enterprise, things like that, and things like Picard and Discovery, but also some of the new movies and the older movies. It's like, I don't think there's anybody I know that has actually worked on every kind of generation of Star Trek. Is that something you ever think about?
Yeah, you know, it was a. I think it's just I make good coffee, so they keep hiring me. But I don't know. But I've just been very, very lucky. I've met a lot of wonderful people, and for like example, the JJ movies, there was a rule for the very first one that nobody from the previous Star Treks were supposed to work on the new show because they didn't want anyone to influence the thought process.
Right.
It was brand new, and I had met Scott Chambliss early on when he was doing Mission Impossible, and they were already crewed up. And he goes, "Hey, we have Star Trek coming up. If you want to join us?" And I go, "Oh, that'd be great fun." And so he calls me and he goes, "I'd love to hire you. Are you available?" Then he calls back an hour later and he goes, "I can't hire you. We have this rule in place." And I go, "Oh," so it was kind of a bummer. But about 6 months into it, he calls. He goes, "We had to let some people go. They moved to other shows." And he goes, "If you promise not to be influenced by what you did before and just do what I ask you to, we'll give you a test." So he gave me a test, and they hid me in the transportation trailer, which is kind of a. They were saying it was pretty scary. The drivers, they're really scary people. And I went in there, they're the funnest guys in the world. But he kind of hid me away, and I passed the test, thankfully, and I just did what he asked for. So it was a blessing. Then after that, I got to carry on with the other ones. That rule went away. But yeah, I started out with Greg Jean on the 5th movie. So I got to work with the original cast and the crew, and I transitioned from hands-on physical models to the art department right after that one. So good times.
Wow.
Been a long time too. That was 88. Started on that.
Yeah, John, we've had a new appreciation for the artists that are involved in Star Trek, from animation to the art department to just all the artwork that's involved. And there's no difference here because I am definitely interested to know about, you know, your inspiration as an artist and how you were able to manifest that skill set into Star Trek.
Well, it was funny. I always wanted to be an artist. I was inspired by Ron Cobb and Sid Mead in the 70s. And, you know, back then they didn't have the art books or the internet and stuff. So we had to rely on Starlog and Cinefex and learn about all our stuff from these guys. And at the time Star Wars came out, it really opened the door. So Ron Cobb's artwork would come out, and then Sid Mead and Joe Johnson, all those wonderful guys from Star Wars and Blade Runner. And they were really a big influence to me. And I always wanted to get in that, but I was a visual effects fan. So I bothered all the visual effects places, Boss Film and Apogee, in the early 80s. And finally they hired me on a show. Top Gun wanted to be my first movie. But I would draw a little bit, but I didn't draw that well. I didn't have schooling. I kind of taught myself. And I could draw to a point, which was okay. But for some reason, making models was a hidden education. Because you're working with your hands, you know, and you build everything from every side and every view. And when I got my first drawing job, that had like translated kind of within. And so when I met Herman, he asked me to draw some spaceships for him and Greg Jean. And I go, sure. So I start drawing. And I go, wow, I couldn't do this 4 or 5 years ago. And it really made me happy that I could actually draw something and maybe possibly get into the art department. And so learned from a lot of people around me. Tim Flattery was an enormous influence when I met him and his work, and a lot of the guys over at Amblin. Ed Barreau was a huge hero. And they were very gracious to help me get into the artwork. And to this day, I'm still a pencil artist. And they for some reason, they still hire me. I don't know why, but I'm the only one that still does it in a way. But the influence comes from aircraft. It comes from everything. And it just depends on the look of it. And there's a difference between Star Trek now and when, like, we were doing Deep Space Nine, because, you know, when we were at Paramount, costumes was over here and makeup was over here. And we all had that interaction. If we had a question, we'd go ask the writer himself, hey, Ron Moore, what do you want to see on this? And he'd go, oh, I hadn't thought about that. And, you know, now we work from home and you don't have that interaction, and this place is all scattered all over the place. But it was nice to be able to have that experience when it was around. And it's almost like scary to call the other departments now because you don't know if you're allowed to. But along the way, there've been so many people that have just influenced the artwork or what I do. And sitting in the room, Ryan Church and Jim Klein, all those guys, just amazing. Like the stuff Matt does, even though it's not hands-on artistic, but his models, you know, his model work is so cool. And you learn from everybody and everything if you open up your mind to it. So incredible amount of influence everywhere you look.
John, you mentioned
my mind. What's that?
Yeah. Oh no, go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to say that blows my mind that when you first started drawing that you didn't think you were very good at it, or that it wasn't a talent that you were born with, because it's like your pencil drawings. I mean, we always kind of joked, you know, that you have a printer for a brain, because I mean, your pencil work is so beautiful, and your concept art is just, it's always amazing. So I just figured that was a, you know, one of those talents that you were born with, that, you know, whenever they were assembling you're like, I would like the artist plug-in, so can I take that? And it just was already part of your brain.
Well, it's funny because working in the model shop and working in the prop department, and they would get the drawings, you know, from the art department, and they'd always grab, like, why can't these guys draw something that I can build? It's so ethereal. And I thought, shoot, if I ever get the art department, I want to make sure that you can build it from my horrible little drawings. And so, you know, I'm always thinking of the model makers and the prop guys, or the next guy that gets it, the VFX guy. Will they be able to use these drawings to help them, or will it just be something they'll curse my name for?
Can you walk us through that transition there, at least in the early stages of getting a drawing from the art department? What are the model makers like? What do they start with? How do they start in that process?
For instance, we were doing a show that Sid Mead was doing the artwork for, and the art director wanted Sid Mead badly, so they hired him for 3 or 4 days. And Sid uses construction lines to show the flow, like it was the device that went on an arm. So we had these flow lines that basically were just showing the direction of the way the forearm works and stuff. And so when we got that drawing to make the model, we start building it. And when we get the prop done, the art director looks at it and goes, well, what about these lines? And we go, well, those are just, they're not part of the prop. They're a part of the flow to show the way the arm goes. And he didn't differentiate between those two things. Mm-hmm. And so we had to apply those lines, which only work from one point of view. So when you turn the prop, you know, the lines don't line up anywhere, but he insisted that if Sid drew it, we had to build it. And so there was an education there that, okay, don't leave your construction lines on, because somebody might think that's a part of what you got to do. But it was always fun. It was always fun to get those drawings. And a lot of times you had to interpret what wasn't there. And when we were doing the Batman with Jim Carrey as the Riddler, we had to make the insane asylum. And all we got was a silhouette of what Arkham Asylum looked like. And they gave us kind of free rein to make the building from that. And And so we had some guys that were really good with the artwork, and so we interpreted it. We did some sketches and stuff. So if you get a little bit, you can interpret if they let you, or they give you full on views and everything. It makes it easier. But no matter what you get, you can make it work. So always good times.
Mm-hmm. So, John, I want to point out that you've worked again on several movies here, but just so that the fans at home know, at least for me, one of the greatest contributions you have given to Star Trek or contributed to was in the movie, what was it, First Contact, which is, for my money, the best Star Trek movie. I know some people will disagree with me, but you designed the USS Enterprise E.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that you can really hang on to for basically the rest of your life. You know, there are certain things that certain people do or contribute to the Star Trek world. I'm sure that is not lost on you, that contribution. When you were doing it, did you give that any thought, or is that something more in hindsight that you realize what a momentous contribution that was?
But it was very scary when that came across. I had just started drawing, didn't know how to do it even mediocrely, I thought. But Herman comes up and goes, "We have to do a new Enterprise." And he goes, and I go, "Are we going to use the D and do the initial?" Because back then it was miniatures, and Star Trek was a very small budget, and models were very expensive to make, physical models, because you had to hire motion control, you had to do opticals, you had to do all kinds of stuff. It was that's why you don't see a lot of model ships in the early Deep Space Nine days in the early shows, because it was too big of a financial endeavor. But when that Enterprise came, I was thinking, when Herman asked me, I go, "Oh, this is way out of my league to do this. I'm more like drawing shoes or tablets or something." But he gave me that task, and so we talked it through. It was in the holidays, and I didn't realize at the time when he asked for it, I started doing sketches of it. And he goes, "It's a battleship. It's not a family ship." So I started drawing it with the short nacelles, like Andy had done with the D. I was trying to carry his architecture forward. And Herman comes up and goes, "Oh, you don't have to do short, because we're doing cinematic. It's not TV." And I didn't realize that the D was formatted for TV, so it fit on the screen.
Oh,
And so
really?
that's why it had a shorter
It's kind of more stout.
profile as opposed to a long one, because the format of TV in the 80s was 13 inches. It was a big TV. And so he goes, "We're doing cinematic, so you can go back to the longer profile." And it needed that because it didn't balance right. And that was another thing I was kind of talking about with the mechanics. When I was working with effects, the Enterprise D model would always be on set, would have to repair it, and a camera would hit it or something, and the cameraman would always kind of throw a fit, like, "Why is this model so hard to photograph?" Because it has the big saucer and the smaller body and the nacelles. There's only a few angles that make it work right, otherwise the proportion looks wrong, depending on what the angle is. And they were throwing a fit about how to film this and make it look right. And the same thing I do. I go, "Well, if I had to do an Enterprise, I'd try and make it where it's nice from every point of view, from a camera point of view." And it was just I didn't mean it to be what it wound up being. I know it's you draw a lot of ships all day, but an Enterprise is like a big deal. And there was a lot of help with it. The Acutis helped out, Doug and Drexler helped out. Everyone in the room was like pitching ideas, helping out. And so I'm drawing this shape. And we thought immediately with that, since it's a battleship, what are the weak areas? And the neck was the big area, I thought, because Wrath of Khan, when Khan is shooting the side of the strut for that connects the hull to the saucer, I thought 2 more shots, he's going to separate that. It's going to be blown out, and the Enterprise will be useless. And I thought in a big Borg battle, that would be the first place to shoot at. So that's why there's no neck. So we made it a very thin profile, so it's a harder target to hit. And so it had a lot of that in the background on it. And then, so I did a steady model, the sketches and stuff, they got approved, and then ILM finished the magic with it. And if it wasn't for John Knoll and Bill George and John Goodson, it wouldn't be the ship it was. Those guys added where I had to leave off. And so it was a great collaboration between all of us. Just wonderful stuff.
Yeah. It's such a beautiful, beautiful, sleek ship.
Yeah.
And for anybody who's listening and watching, John, I think your blog is still up and eavesdroppings.
You know what? I ran out of room on that, and they wanted to charge a fortune to put more pictures up, so it ended. Like I think 13.
But there's still some really, really cool drawings, and I remember some posts about the process of designing the Eve. Like at one point, you had the I mean, we ended with the nacelle struts swept back, which helps. I mean, that the ship looks fast sitting still as it is with those swept back nacelles, but at one point you had them kind of sweeping forward. And so it's a great resource if anybody is curious about reading up on some of John's process as he went through the designing of this ship.
Yeah, we were trying
Eavesdropping. That's such a great
futuristic
name.
ideas with that with those struts, and there was an air or this particular jet at NASA Dryden I saw, and it had the wings were swept forward, and it was really cool. I don't think it was past the experimental stage, but I saw that and I go, that's pretty cool. Let's mess around with our struts on the Enterprise. And it didn't look right when we did it, and it was kind of going through a couple of iterations. Well, let's try this, and Fritz, who's Herman's son, looked at it and goes, oh, looks like a turkey, Thanksgiving turkey in a pan. And that's all we needed to, like, okay, if it looks like that, we got to move on. So we're all kind of waiting for some reason to not carry out that design process anymore. So Fritz saved the day.
Wow. Yeah, I'm looking at pictures of it here. And that's, you said you're not much of an artist, but you certainly turn out some great work. And I like the way that you reverse engineer a lot of your thinking. You talked about, if I was in the art department, I would draw it in a way so that there was no mistakes when it gets to build. Then you just mentioned here about designing the ship so that it was functional for camera angles, and so to me, that's like taking the problems and figuring out how to make solutions so that you don't run into those problems going forward. And that just shows me the kind of, the mind and the approach that you take to design and build. And so that's wonderful. And can you talk a little bit about, my personal favorite Star Trek, which is Deep Space Nine, and coming in season 4, and what that was like coming in on that show and working on those, really the bulk of the really good seasons for our show.
Oh yeah, certainly. And one thing I was just going to add in is, have you heard of an artist named Brian Froud? He's an English artist. He's the one Jim Henson hired to do Dark Crystal in the lab.
Heard of him and heard of that.
And he did a little video, and I heard him talking. I hadn't worked in Hollywood yet, and he made this little comment. He goes, I draw things rough. I don't want to finish the drawing because someone's going to take it after I'm done doing the sketch. And if I draw it too complete, the next guy that gets it can't add their creativity to it. And so I thought that's the coolest thing in the world. So I always try to apply that. So when I draw something, I try to keep it open so the next set of hands that gets on it isn't just copying, but they can be artistic and creative too. That's what makes the collaboration fun, is having everybody put their thoughts and ideas into what you'll get to see on the screen. So it's always cool. But with Deep Space Nine, it was very interesting because we shared movies. It was Herman Zimmerman was our designer. And so when we got First Contact, we were doing Deep Space Nine in the morning and First Contact in the afternoon. And that's the way it went all the way through Nemesis. We were on Enterprise and did Nemesis in the afternoon. But
Wow.
Deep Space Nine was wonderful. I took.
Do you wear a different hat? Do you clock in and clock back out?
Jim Martin was the illustrator on Deep Space Nine, and he wanted to move on to movies. So an opening came up, and I took his spot. He wanted to do Alien 4, and so he made that big movie transition quite well. But he left a beautiful architectural footprint behind that I could follow his design patterns, how he did it. Just a brilliant. He's one of the artists I wanted to mention earlier, who inspired me. He introduced me to the blue pencil, which I'd never heard of before. And but he
blue pencil.
Yeah, there. Back in the day, you have to ink your drawings and then color them with marker. And if you drew in ink and you made a mistake, you were in trouble. So he designed everything in a blue pencil. Excuse me, quick drink.
Mm-hmm.
And we had the Xerox copiers at the time. Excuse me. And the copiers would not pick up the blue pencil. So you could draw your drawing, your ink over top the blue pencil, put it in the copier, and the blue would drop away. Then you have this beautiful black line drawing you could do your markers on. And it was just the way the machinery worked at the time. But the pencil stuck, and I still use it. But that was a thing I learned from Jim. And from there, you'd take it to the marker, and sometimes you'd scan it through the computer and print it and stuff.
So the designs that Jim came up with, would that include like the promenade and some of the interior of the ships and whatnot?
Yeah, he and Ricardo Delgado were the two illustrators. Rick Sternbach had started and moved to Voyager. And those two guys they're both kind of comic book artisan style, especially Ricardo. And that kind of spilled over to Jim style, where you do the heavy black shading and stuff. And just remarkable talent these guys are. And so we'd have all their artwork laid there. So when I started in the art department, I'd see Jim stuff and Ricardo stuff. It was like, oh my gosh, these guys are incredible. And so the primary job when I started was to make props for Joe Longo, the prop guy. And then ships and sets and all that was kind of secondary. But Joe was fun. He was a very unique individual where he was very frownish and cranky. I'm sure you know on stage.
Yeah, I know.
But he was a sweetheart of a guy, and
I love Joe.
Yeah, you knew deep down he was.
He looked like one of the maid guys from Goodfellas, though. Like he could be in Goodfellas easily.
Yeah, exactly. And so to make him happy was really hard, and so you could make it a challenge. But he was cool, and but Deep Space was really fun. It was a great way to draw a lot of stuff because what was a TV show back then? 7-day turnaround for production before you film, 7 or 8 days, and then you'd start something new. So you're constantly learning new things. If you're like a new artist like I was, you couldn't have asked for a better. It was like going to school, but with a bazillion projects to do every couple of hours. And like I said, having everyone around you was very unique in the education. What was fun about Mike Akuda, his office was behind me. What he would do is he'd work with costumes. And when we get a new alien race, he'd design a logo. It'd either be, if the aliens were kind of pleasant, it'd have rounded shapes to it. But they were kind of aggressive, they'd have angular shapes. And I would kind of tee off what he would do with that logo. So if I'm doing props or ships or anything for costumes, I would use what he came up with first is where I would kind of carry on from. And the same with costumes with Bob Blackman. When he's doing the costumes, you go over and see what they're doing. What fabric are you going to use? He goes, oh, I got this great leopard style stuff. And so you'd base your colors of the ships and stuff on what he was doing with the costumes. And so it was really a unique family, the way that worked. And Deep Space Nine was such a unique gift to all of us. I think not only the wonderful writers and the acting and the shows, but just the way everyone interacted. I didn't ever see anyone that had an ego or someone you couldn't approach and talk to in any department, the producers all the way down. I just thought it was really cool, really unique world to work in and start off.
Can you talk a little bit about Far Beyond the Stars? Because you mentioned you did a lot of work on that episode.
Yeah, that's one of your favorites, and that was an interesting one because if I recall, Avery directed it as well. And what it was, it's a flashback episode where Cisco is taken back into the past, into the 1950s, where there's segregation in the world, where everyone is either a victim or pitied upon by race and tortured. But he gets in this position to work in kind of a sci-fi novel thing, and the way it works is they get a pile of drawings, they throw them out. Who wants this? Who wants that? And then they write a story around what the drawing is. So he gets a prehistoric drawing of what Deep Space Nine would look like in comic book form in the 50s. Jim Vanover did a real rough model of it. And so I did my drawings based on what he did. But we did all kinds of wonderful stuff because we had to set decorate his room as well as the publishing office. And everyone went nuts. So we remade old 50s sci-fi novels that didn't exist. Then we did all the beautiful decorations in Cisco's apartment, like the cycles of the moon and all this beautiful stuff, things that I never got to draw before. And Laura Richards, the set decorator, she just gave us a list of stuff. She goes, if you have time, could you do this, and that I need it for Cisco's room? I'm like, oh gosh, yeah. So I can't even think past the stuff we did. Besides the moon drawings, we did the comic drawings. That was unbelievable. Just an amazing amount of
So
stuff.
fun.
In every department, just go nuts making that room. And what was funny, I never met Jerry Ryan before. I never knew anyone on Voyager, but there's a scene where Cisco drops the drawing, blows in the wind, and a cop steps on it, stomps on the drawing. And we needed to have the drawings pre-stomped on. And so they were filming, I think, the Nazi version, one of the Nazi shows with Voyager. And I saw Jerry standing there with those big, giant 1940 shoes. And I walked up and go, hey, could you stomp on these drawings for me? I need a footprint right here. So she stomped on all the drawings in the alley before they filmed their scenes. And I took them over, and Jim Van Over saw it. And he goes, oh, what are you talking about Jerry Ryan with? I go, who's that? I just asked that lady over there to stomp on my drawings. She had these cool
Oh, wow.
And so when you
that's
see the
good.
show, that's Jerry's footprint. That's in the middle of the drawing.
Oh, wow. That is a deep, deep, deep cut
Yeah.
there. Wow. Thanks for that story. That's pretty fun. And those drawings are very prominent in the episode. I mean, it's one of the things that when I, think back of the episode, I can literally see the sketches of Deep Space Nine in my head and those drawings. That is fantastic. You mentioned Michael Okuda a lot. There was a lot of chemistry with him on the set working.
Oh yeah, they're just wonderful. The whole art department was such a wonderful group, and they welcomed me into their family right away. Which when you start somewhere new, you wonder if you'll fit in with everybody. And they were ridiculously kind and sweet and nice, and a lot of things in common. And they didn't just stay friends in the art department. We did stuff after coffee and all that stuff. So it was really a wonderful group, and Mike would take not a fatherly role, but he would take a very kind of educational presence, because they wrote all the encyclopedias and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I'd hear Herman say stuff. We need something that's Kardashian. And I'm going, what's Kardashian? And Mike would come out and goes, in case you know what Kardashian is. He'd open up the encyclopedia. He goes, this is the race. This is what they look like. You can use this. And so he gave me one of his encyclopedias. And so he was always right there. And I'd go visit him often. I go, Mike, what would you suggest? And he would say this or that. And then you'd hear Doug Drexler in the other room. I wouldn't do that. I'd do this instead. and all the guys in there, they were wonderful. And so you couldn't have asked for a better set of hands around you to make sure you're doing everything the way it should be. Mm. So, and Star Trek has such a history and such an architectural base from the beginning to the end. And that's something Mike always tried to do, which was really cool, is try to carry the architecture and the art tones from the original series into where we are, because it's supposed to be the Trek past, obviously. But he tried to carry that, so there's always little bits and pieces. So you'd refer to that, go, oh, I think I saw something like that, the original series, or in the Next Generation. And that was Mike's doing. And so after Nemesis, they kind of moved on, and I kept doing other Trek. So I tried to keep that in line with what I did always, to try and carry what we saw in the original series in what we're doing into the newer shows, just to keep that line of architecture tied in no matter. Sometimes it would make it, sometimes it wouldn't. And you never know from a fan's point of view if they saw they were referring to that when they're watching the shows. Oh, that's cool. I saw something like that in this episode or that episode. So, but it's there. It's always there if you know what you're looking for.
John, along those lines, normally we would think it's great to have kind of that backbone or that spine of Star Trek, that through line that goes from one series to the next series to the next series. But then I wonder for shows, for example, like Discovery, which is completely different. The designs are totally different, deliberately so. It feels, updated and much more modern, and series hadn't been going for whatever it was, 13 or 15 years or something. So it's really interesting to hear you talk about like keeping like the slight similarities and bringing those in. But were there any conversations specifically, for example, like with Discovery, about modernizing these designs or about starting fresh or about resetting your artistic mind? Was there anything like that?
That was a very interesting show. Mark Worthington was the production designer, and he had called and brought me on the show with a bunch of other guys, and Matt was on it. And there was a weird VFX. I don't know what happened. They were working, and all of a sudden, they were all kicked off and gone, and another group moved in, and we never knew why. Matt, I don't even think Matt knows why, but they were working one day.
I know.
Beautiful work, and they're gone.
that's a conversation for off camera.
That's for things left unsaid.
Yeah.
But it was an oddity because they kept having crewing of the show, and so it kept changing.
Okay.
Obviously, the art department stayed because we're working from home, so we're invisible. So when they do these big crew changes, we'd wait till the new people came in and go, "Hi, we were on this before you started." And I'm trying to remember the showrunner's name that started. Do you remember who the first showrunner was?
Brian Fuller.
Brian Fuller. He had a very unique vision of what he wanted Discovery to look like. And he brought out the Ralph McQuarrie and the Ken Adams drawings. And he goes, I want the Discovery to look like this. And it was a rejected ship from the 70s from a show they were working on. And so that was the challenge in its own. And so immediately we started doing sketches, and I did round nacelles because it's supposed to be 10 years before Captain Kirk. And so we had Enterprise, which is several decades before that. So we established that architecture that round nacelles were how it started. The Phoenix has round nacelles, the NX-01. And so we got the Discovery, started drawing that way. And Brian saw those and he goes, I want to see something different. I don't want round nacelles. And I was like, oh my gosh, how are we going to tie the architecture together? Because that's everyone knows that's where it should go. And so he threw that challenge at us. And we're sitting there trying to figure out what to do. We had, I think, 12 ships we had to do immediately for the Armada, the first few shows. And Brian really liked flat ships. He liked things that were very, very skinny in profile. And we had to do a lot of them. And so I was talking, Mark moved on with one of those changes, Mark Worthington. And Todd Chernowski came in. He was the art director for Mark, and so he became the new production designer. We're trying to figure out how can we explain these ships that look so drastically different than what they should really look like. And I pitched the idea like, what if you treat it like it's Edwards Air Force Base in the 40s, where every company is competing to make the first plane that goes faster than the speed of sound? I mean, everyone's making their own ideas. They all look vastly different, but they have the same goal in the end. And I go, what do you say we treat the ships like that? This is an experimental stage where they've broken away from the Vulcans. Now it's the Federation's designs that they're trying to figure out the nacelles. We had the spore drive, all these weird things going on. So Todd goes, that's a great idea. So we named the classes of all the ships after space pioneers. So you have the Yeager class after Chuck Yeager. You got the Cardenas after Robert Cardenas. We have the Amelia Earhart class. All these classes, Arthur C. Clarke, they're all named after the pioneers. And we thought maybe we can get away with it that way, that this was just a stepping stone area of experimentation. So
that's brilliant.
It didn't go anywhere, but at least in the art department, we had a backbone of what we would draw from. And when we got the Enterprise, at the end of Discovery, we were trying to think it should be like one step away from what the Jeffries ship looked like in Captain Kirk. We knew it was just 10 years away. So we took on that project. Doug Drexler, Scott Schneider, he was an old model maker, and he's a brilliant CG guy. And Todd Chernowski gave us the project. Who goes, okay, make it a little bit different, but as a precursor to that ship. And so we drew it in a way where it would be a retrofit from the Jeffrey ship. So you just took things off of it, and it would be the Jeffrey ship. And so we finished the model, set it away, and we forgot that we're not the last hands to touch it. We kind of forgot our own set of rules. So it went away, went to digital effects. And when the episode aired, it was the first time we saw it, the nacelle straps were angled back. And we're going, oh my gosh, what happened? And because somewhere that design element had changed, and it kind of breached the architecture from the Matt Jeffrey ship to the refit from the motion picture. So it made this kind of architectural breach of what it should be. And I remember Scott and I were looking at that going, wow, what happened after it left our hands? But like I said, you kind of forget that you're not the last hands that touch it to these, on the air. But in the original designs, that's the way it was. So we're always trying to keep, like I said, we're always trying to keep that architecture on an even line. And sometimes it makes it, sometimes it doesn't. And the final ship turned out really, it's very, very beautiful. The effects.
Does that even line also apply to the props that you make, like the stuff that people are holding in their hands, whether it's a tricorder or some kind of phaser?
Yeah, sometimes, the phasers especially, because they're well known. With an alien race, you have a lot more free reign, but if you're trying to keep it in line, because when you look at phasers and shuttlecraft, it's the Type 11 or the Type 15, so you're following a bit of a lineage. And so, especially with those two, shuttles and phasers, you try to keep that line. You got to modernize them, of course, for the newer shows.
Well, I noticed actually these nacelles on the E look very reminiscent of phaser rifles. Federation phaser rifles. When I saw these, that's the first thing I thought.
Yeah, very, very much so. Not intentionally, but that line has turned into a phaser rifle in the future. So let's harken back and use that a little bit. So.
John, I remember there was one night that I forget I think it was when we were working on the Comic-Con trailer, and you were still, trying to get doing drawings, and I saw that you were online, and it was like 12:30 in the morning, and I sent you a message. I was like, John, what are you doing? You were like, I'm drawing the cells over here. I've got to have I forget how many drawings you said. I have to have those for a meeting in the morning. I just thought.
Oh yeah, it's funny, you get the ship shape done fairly quickly, and now the hard thing to improve is the nacelles. You'll do more nacelles than ship drawings, and I'd say for Discovery, we were over 100 different ideas with those nacelles, and they just went back and forth, long, short, fat, stubby, things that had mechanical elements that they'd open and they'd close. It was unbelievable the amount of stuff that went into that. And I think the very last note we got, we're at the end. They had to choose one, and it was those long ones, those really, really long ones. And I think Brian had asked me, he goes, I want some really long nacelles. And so we made those exaggeratedly long ones. And that's the one that made it. But it was, that seems to be the hard thing now. It was the same with Picard. It was the same with the second season of Discovery. It's just, that's the hard part to get approved, the nacelles. So.
I think even Probert had some trouble with his Enterprise D nacelles, where he had he had them really short and stubby, but then at one point they added a little bit of extra bit on the end there too. So yeah, I guess it's a universal constant that the nacelles are the hardest part.
They certainly are, and it's funny talking about things that you try to tie in that don't make it. Like Andy's version of the Enterprise C, I think is my favorite, the one that didn't make it. And I remember he worked really hard on that design. It's beautiful. If you haven't seen it, just research Andy Probert's Enterprise C, the rejected sketch. And it's like, what a beautiful ship. And I think it wound up being that they had to make something in the model shop. And I want to say Greg Jean might have been involved. And if you give Greg permission to make a ship, he'll use what he has in the shop. If you don't give him a hard design, he'll make something up. And he's wickedly wonderful at it. And so I'm not sure how the artwork worked between Andy's drawing and what the model was, but pretty amazing stuff.
Is this what we're talking about here? Let's pull this up.
Yeah, I think didn't Rick Sternbach? I think he got.
Rick might have taken the project after.
Yeah, I think that's that's why we ended up with the ambassador class as we did versus Andy's more curved.
Yeah, he was trying to tie in a transition between the C and the D, and that kind of reflected in I don't know if that model reflects the artwork that that 3D model, but it's beautiful when you see his drawing. You go, wow, that's pretty fantastic.
Yeah,
it's like we're talking about a sketch.
Yeah, there's some drawings of it out there of it.
Okay.
So, but while Ryan's looking that up, John, you talked about early on You talked about making a good cup of coffee, and for those you don't know, John he's a wonderful practical joker, and I wonder if you could talk to us about fish coffee.
Yeah, fish coffee. Well, I have to tell you, working in the model shop is like working with carpenters. You get punched in the arm, and people play jokes on you all the time. And when I moved to the art department, I didn't realize they don't like that stuff at all. They're not that type of hands-on joking type. But it was like the first couple of weeks, I'm working late, and I ordered a pizza, and I got the wrong one. It was covered with anchovies.
Yeah.
And I go, oh my gosh, what am I doing with all these anchovies? And Fritz, it was the old coffee pot. We put the grinds in the holder in the filter, and then you'd stick it in the coffee pot in the morning, be in the refrigerator. So I buried all those anchovies under the coffee. And Fritz comes in the morning, puts it in the machine, and I'm kind of rubbing my hands, going, "This is going to be fun." And
you could probably smell it. Really, you didn't? I feel like the whole room would fill up with
It didn't
fish
smell
smell.
like I was expecting, but it made a grease slick on top of the pot. So he pours a cup. Oh my gosh, what is this horrible trash? And I start laughing, and I go, "Put fish in the coffee." And so we'd sit back and watch everyone come in. I was always first in the office, then Fritz, and then other people would come next. And oh gosh, I can't remember, but one of our art directors came in, Randy McElvey, and he picks up a copy, he adds a sip, and the theater mask face where one's got the smile, the other one has the frown. Mm-hmm. He made that exact frown. He goes, "What is this?" But he drank the whole cup.
Yeah.
It was gone when Doug Drexler came in, and he comes over to my desk and he goes, "All right, here you put fish in the coffee." And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "You should be very lucky I didn't drink it. I would have kicked you till you were dead."
There are a lot of Star Trek fans right now. They're thinking that's Antedian coffee. It's just for Antedians.
Coffee.
Oh, yeah.
Food.
That's when Drexler and I became great friends, was after the coffee trick, because he didn't drink it, so he just heard about it.
Well, I do also want to ask you.
Any clips here.
Yeah, the sun's definitely coming in there. John, besides Star Trek, I do want to touch on very quickly so many other really cool things, because I myself, being a nerd, a big time hardcore dork, I see a lot of cool nerdy shows and movies like Cowboys and Aliens, which I immediately, I remember when I first saw the billboard, my first thought was the pitch meeting where they say, "All right, we got a movie idea called Cowboys and Aliens." And the execs are like, "What's it about?" And they're like, "Cowboys and Aliens." Sold. I mean, I thought that was like the best idea I've ever heard. But also a ton of Marvel stuff like Captain America, Spider-Man, Guardians of the Galaxy, Ant-Man and Wasp, also WandaVision, things like the Watchmen, Godzilla, The Dark Crystal. What the heck? That is so much.
Will you get to the one? I was waiting for the Terminator 2, bro.
There's too many to name them all.
You gotta put that in there. It's like
that's
one of the
very
greatest
true
of all times.
Was there ever any moments, John, where you were just like, "Oh my God," besides Star Trek, where it like hit you like an anvil on the head, like, "Whoa, I'm working on Iron Man," or "I'm working on Terminator 2," or whatever it happened to be?
Yeah, Red October was one of them. But I was a huge fan of John Carpenter. And I always would call up and ask if they were doing anything. And I timed it just right, and they were doing a movie called Ghost of Mars. And it's kind of just a long, bloody rock video if you watch it now. But I always wanted to work with Carpenter. I got to work with him on that. And he's such a cool, unique director, the way he works. And I was like so excited and to work on it. And it's not a great movie to watch, but it's still one of my favorite movies I ever worked on. But the way he sees things is shadows. And so I showed him some of the first drawings of this Martian landscape we're doing the architecture. And he goes, "Boy, that building would cast a pretty cool shadow." And they said it about a second one. And I go, "Oh, he's all about what kind of shadow is this going to cast?" Because he hides his creatures in the shadows. And so from then I drew everything based on what kind of shadow it would cast. And immediately found out that's exactly what he was looking for. So when we have our meetings, "Oh, I like this, and that, because look at that cool shadow." And he was so fun. And he scores his own movies too, does the music. And so I asked when we were done, I go, can I come watch you score the film? So he let me come down and watch him do it on the synthesizer. And he had a band called Anthrax come in.
Anthrax
Anthrax
was in it? I didn't know that.
They're the rock side of the soundtrack. So
Yeah.
John's doing the synthesizer, and Anthrax comes and does the heavy rock score. And so
That's freaking cool.
Some little place called Cherokee Studio on, I want to say Fairfax, maybe. It was cool, very, very fun. So I was excited about that. And if I'd ever get to work on a Mad Max, that I would jump in a second to do it. The Marvel ones are fun. Terminator 2 was fun to a point.
Sequest. It's pretty cool.
Sequest was great fun, and that was cool. I was always a Spielberg fan, and so I got onto that. I don't know how, but I got onto it, and it was great fun. That was the first time I worked at a studio. Universal was just a blast. Every day at lunch, I'd go explore the lot, and good times.
Wow. So how much time did you spend working with directors or writers, on a project?
Usually not that much with the directors. I'm usually with the production designer, and he does everything. He'll go to the meetings. Sometimes we'll go to the meetings, not too often, because usually the visual effects shows are so heavy. Spending 2 or 3 hours in a meeting every day kills that drawing time. And so when we did the first JJ Star Trek, Russell Bobbitt was the prop designer. And after I did a few ships with Scott, he sent me to work with Russell. And that's how that whole Marvel world started. Russell did Cowboys and Aliens, so he invited me out of that. And then he got the Marvel gigs. He became like the lead prop man for all the Marvel shows. So he would bring in prop designers for some shows, and he'd take 4 or 5 at a time. And so that's what would stack them, like WandaVision and all the Loki, all the TV shows were on top of each other. So he'd be doing all of those, and I'd be drawing for him. But they're fun. They're all out of Atlanta. Great place to go. Great restaurants and barbecue. God, couldn't ever say no to Atlanta. But good times. And so he's really taken me on all of those adventures with him, which has been, I can't even thank him enough how fun that's been. But
wow,
good time.
John, it's funny because when I was reading your bio, one of the things it mentions is working at a grocery store, and I just thought that was interesting that you left that in, and I thought it was good to just see that you were able to manifest the life that you have now, starting from this grocery store, and can you talk just a little bit about your beginnings there?
Oh yeah, that was my first job as a grocery store. I turned 16, and they hired me at this place called Bayless. It was an Arizona chain. Been there since like the early 1900s, and I was there almost 7 years. And the customers were wonderful, and all the people we worked for, our manager and stuff, and just that interaction with everybody. It was kind of the same with movies. Everyone's really the same down at heart. You got people that you work for and people you're working with. And you have bad customers, you have good customers, and that would make or break your day. And the same with work. You get a bad director or a good director, and depending on how they handle the bad things, either they yell at you or they're very easygoing. Look at Jonathan Franks. He never gets mad, and like even on a bad day, he knows everyone else is working to solve the problem. So just the personalities are wonderful. And with the grocery store, I learned a lot. Learning to work with people, seeing solution problems that would come up, how to take care of them, would not make a mess. And so it was wonderful. It was a good thing. I almost made it a full-time career because I was driving to Hollywood at least every other month to take portfolios and stuff up and try and get in. And my boss was always cool. Take the day off, go to Hollywood, drop your stuff off. I know you have to do it a weekday when they're there. And cool. It was really cool. A cool chapter in like the grocery store. So can't say enough good things about it.
Good boss is super important when it's a tough job.
Oh yeah.
And
that was in the day.
That's a great story.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was going to say that was in the day too when grocery stores would close early the night before Thanksgiving, the night before Christmas, and they'd be closed. No one ever was open during a holiday. And so that changed immediately when I got to California. I go, wow, I can go shopping on Christmas Day. I can go get groceries on Thanksgiving Day in California. So it was a whole different world when I got out there. It was 85 when I moved to California. So it was a eye-opening experience for sure.
Yeah.
I thought
That's a beautiful
when you said 85, my first thought was degrees. I didn't realize you meant years. So when you said it was 85, I'm like, sounds like November around here.
Yeah. 85. Yep.
Well, John, this has been so much fun. I can't believe how many things you've done in your life. And we could talk to you for like 3 more hours. There's so much more to discuss, but we're out of time for today. You've lived an incredible life. Looking forward to much more. Oh, also you do some of these pencil sketches. Can we talk about your commissions just for a second before we go?
Oh, sure.
These right here, for the guy that says his sketches are mediocre at best or something like that, right? Look how gorgeous these are.
Beautiful.
That's a pencil?
Yeah, it's a white pencil. And so, yeah, that's the tablet.
Yeah.
It's like a cardstock. It's really great stuff.
Wow.
And these fabulous white pencils. So it's always good.
If people want to commission you for these, where can they find you for those?
I kind of just put it up on my Facebook page when I have openings. I'll go, I have 10 openings, and I try to do it every other month or so. And the requests are getting very, very complicated. It used to be just a little ship or something. And I think Matt started the trend of 2 things on one drawing. So 2 submarines and 2 jets. And so, but I actually learned this from when I started working at Fantasy 2. They were a Visualplex company. They did all the Jim Cameron stuff in the day. They did the original Terminator. And when we started on Terminator 2, I got hired over there. But they had a drawing on gray paper of the Hunter Killer tank. Jim Cameron drew it. And he was gray card with white and black pencil. And very little line work, but because you were on a different color background than white, it was like the coolest thing in the world. And so when I started doing these commissions, people always ask at the convention when we do them, do you draw pictures for that people request? And I pitched it on the black paper with the very first one because that white pencil, it really is it makes everything kind of stand out. It's a kind of a poppy technique.
Mm-hmm.
Has a lot of pop to it. And so everyone seems to like them, and they're really happy with them, and they make a lot of fun requests. So it keeps the pencil hand working, and it's a lot of fun. It's really. Are
you measuring these things out, or is that all freehand, John? When you're doing that bird of prey, for example, one of your drawings,
it's all freehand. There's the Shrike from Card, and a lot of times, a lot of ships that they'll request I don't really have a lot of knowledge on, so I'll have to pull out the Eagle Moss model or something to use for the details and stuff. But yeah, I'll do. I try to do a progress. I'll do a quick basic sketch of the layout, and I'll post it. And I'll go coming this afternoon a little bit more, and it will be like a 3-post project from start to finish, and they're cool. They're really a lot of fun, and the size trying to make them fit that paper sometimes is a trick. And so that's one of the ones where it wouldn't fit when you showed the entire enterprise. So I went to the cinematic view and did the cropping. So it's fun.
Gorgeous.
Beautiful stuff. Beautiful stuff. Wow. For a guy who says he's not a good artist.
I know. It's beautiful.
I look at my artwork and I go, I'm very happy that, like I said, I keep getting hired, but
like
I don't know. I don't know.
Michelangelo?
Who
you're comparing it to.
Like people are going to start asking you to draw on their ceilings. All right. Well, John, this has been so cool. We really hope to have you back again sometime. This has been an absolute honor, and there's so much more to discuss in future dates. But thank you again for your time. We really appreciate it.
Yeah,
it was wonderful. Like I said, I'm a fan of all your guys, so great fun to hang out with you.
Oh, thanks so much. Everybody at home, thank you for hanging out with us. Isn't John freaking awesome? And special thanks to Matt Boardman for sitting in with us as well, dropping a lot of knowledge for us.
Thanks for having me.
Totally. Stick around, everybody, and thanks for hanging out with us on Virtual TrekCon 5. Hey, everybody. we're not quite done yet, because as soon as we stopped hitting record, we were talking with John and he showed us something freaking amazing.
Yeah.
And we're like, we got to show everybody this thing. So John, if you will, please, this is from your own computer here.
All right, here we go. And there it is. And what this is, we were just talking about this. This was kind of the first white pencil drawing I did on blackboard, which kind of inspired the commissions later. But what this is Avery asked for a particular drawing for his set wall. He goes, I'd kind of like something that has like a cycle of the moon on it. Mm-hmm. And so Laura, you said that to Laura Richards, the set decorator, and she came in with the request. She goes,
Far Beyond the Stars, by the way, Far Beyond the Stars.
This is the episode Far Beyond the Stars. And you can see it in his apartment. It's on one particular wall, and they film on that wall quite a bit, so you can see it. But it's very imaginary. I wasn't internet savvy at all, so I got information from the library, and I kind of came up with this kind of Roman numeral chart that means absolutely nothing on this. It just the illusions of the movies are in full play right here. That it's all imaginary, but. So that's the cycle, and you got this crazy Roman numeral thing that makes it look scientific, and you got the little quarter drawings on the bottom showing the two cycles. So, but it was fun. It was a really cool project, and
ecliptic dehimis copper drove umbra terra. I'm reading some of the words that are written on here. It's got your name on here, John Eaves 97.
You get the Far Beyond the Stars title on the far right on the bottom, and
Far Beyond the Stars.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
Yeah, there
bottom
it is.
right. Wow.
And I don't remember what the numerals.
Trip to the Moon.
All the numerals, I don't know what they stand for, the letters, but AZ on the second cycle of the moon was for Arizona. That's my hometown, and so.
Oh, okay.
Too long ago to remember
for Paul George.
Paul George, that's right. That's the one. You get it. Well, anyway,
this is great. This is beautiful stuff. I just wanted to, see that so everybody can kind of enjoy some of that, because I'm sure the camera pans by it in the episode, but there's no way you're going to see that much detail without looking at it in this kind of format, and to see the kind of detail that you put in, it's just remarkable. I mentioned Michelangelo earlier. That looked like some Da Vinci stuff, right?
Yes.
There, so,
well, I actually used him for reference. So there secretly there is a lot of Da Vinci in there. So
yeah, very good, very good.
Cool.
Thank you for that. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, and thanks for sticking around a little longer, because we're like, hang on a second, we have got to show this off. It looks so cool. Thanks again so much, John, and everybody at home. This time for sure. See you next time on Virtual TrekCon 5.